أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين وأصحابه المنتجبين ولعنة الله دائما على أعدائهم أجمعين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أما بعد، السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا بأبي Abdullah Hussain عليه الصلاة والسلام. Continuing from yesterday, we spoke of individuality being the hallmark of existence. And there are no two things in this world of God that share the same identity. Everything comes as one. From a blade of grass to animals, to trees, to human beings. Now this individuality in existence carries itself forward in individuality, in our intellectual aptitudes, in our psychological makeup, in our emotional interactions. It gives us a worldview that is unique to us ourselves. And that individuality is inescapable. Now, if there is this level of individuality in the world, that it is the hallmark of the world, then it is a real facet of existence. If it is a real facet of existence, then it has to be honored at the level of the human individual and the way in which the human being is. And this is what makes the human being such a unique creature. The very fact that me and you are told that we have been created, although creation needs to be explained, what is creation as opposed to what is origination and initiation, that we have been created as individuals. You see, my children are not my creation in the broadest way that we understand creation. In the broadest way that we understand creation. We don't have the time to go into this debate of creation and initiation and origination. But my children are not my creation. I am only a means for their arrival into this world. My hand motion is my creation, to the extent to which it obeys me and cannot defy me. But even there is limitation because my agility goes as I grow old. But my thoughts are my creation. They are wholly subservient to me, dependent upon me, and contingent upon me. They have no independence of their own. I think, initiate, originate, fashion, refashion my thoughts. I can keep them in existence and I can take them off existence immediately. I can resume my thought from where I stopped it, or I can change it, or I can forget all about it. That is my creation. That is my origination and my creation. But my children are not my creation. The very fact that they have their individuality, their way of understanding, their way of looking at things, how odd they are my genetic code, and yet they are totally different from me. So I'm just a means for their arrival into this earth. They have their own unique individual identity with which they think, with which they lead their lives. They are fashioned, refashioned through their own experiences. And the very fact that we are taught through our theology that when you are laid to rest finally within your graves, this is you and your God, nothing to do with anybody else. And the very fact that Allah says, you have come to us as individuals, كَمَا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ فُرَادًا, as we created you as individuals. Everybody's test, everybody's accounting and accountability will be at their individual level. There is nothing more than individuality. Even my association with my God is a very personal, individual relationship. My whole world is my individual, unique world. My relationship with my God is my unique, individual relationship with my God. My destiny is my unique, individual destiny. When me and you go to paradise, inshallah, within the same paradise, we will be in our individual paradises, and it cannot be otherwise. Our experience of the paradise will be our personal experience of a common place, which will make it exceptionally subjective to ourselves. This individuality is inescapable. Now, if individuality is the absolute norm, then that individuality has to be appreciated and has to be respected. And more than anybody else, Allah honors that individuality. If we look at the spiritual literature, we will see everybody is at a different rank. The Prophet has said, Hasanat al-Hasanat al-Abrar, Sayyiat al-Muqarrabin. The good deeds of the righteous people are evil deeds of those who are in proximity with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala due to their own individuality, uniqueness of connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now this individuality brings in our own understanding of the same truth. So two people are faced with the same truth, but they will understand it uniquely in their own ways. This unique understanding of the truth in our individual capacities is our truth for us. The very fact that in a community that binds us through a somewhat greater identity, it is not composed of same individuals with the same outlook who enjoy the same appreciation of the truth. This unity that we have is more on the lines of a broader designation. But within this broad designation, there are individuals that are very, very unique. How strange that we are ready to accept this group within this whole as one body, and we forget that this one body is comprised of individuals who are wholly different from each other. The same thing, they're understanding it differently. Yet, as one body, it's not a question of us tolerating each other, it's a question of us accepting each other and more so appreciating each other. We are already doing the most godly thing very naturally. We are doing it inadvertently and very naturally because it's a part and parcel of the human condition. I ask one simple question: why can't this same attitude, same ethos be applied to humanity at large who is following the same model? Think about it carefully as we go into this topic. Individuality brings in relativity. Relativity is not an evil term or an evil word. It is the absolute norm of existence. Relativity. Everyone will understand the truth at a very different level. And all of that is to be appreciated and respected. Of course, there's a cutoff point where something becomes wrong, and we want to talk about that, inshallah. But look at it this way. When the Quran states that the people who believe, the Jews, the Christians, the Sabians, whoever amongst them believes in Allah, the last day, and does righteous deeds, will have salvation, will have the reward, and have no fear upon them, he is basing that particular judgment on the facet of individuality and relativity of the truth. All of them have understood the same truth in their own individualistic ways. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so mindful that our cultures influence the way in which we grow and the way in which we think. And He is extremely mindful of that, and He honors it. Me and you cannot escape influence of culture. We are born in the cradle of pre-existing cultures that form us and shape us. And from there initiates a life journey through which we introspect, we critique, We try to elevate beyond the limitations of those cultures, but all of these trends are individualistic and they bring about relativity. The absolute norm of the world is variety, relativity, and the absolute beauty is to accept this relativity. Now all of these paths are true, because we want to go into plurality in just a few minutes. All of these paths are true. They only become wrong at one point, when they become less than productive. So long as they are productive, what do we mean by productive? The same thing we've been talking about in the last few days. They are productive so long as they serve that fundamental property of existence, which is growth and self-realization. So long as they are productive, this relativity of understanding, these cultures through which we abide, they are all good so long as they are productive. As soon as they lead to stagnation, that is when they become wrong. So now if somebody says Islam versus culture, I find that the whole of his formulation is inaccurate. I will say, well, what do you understand by Islam if it's not conveyed by culture? What do you understand by Islam if it's not conveyed by theology? The way to understand it is this: it's not Islam versus culture. It is culture that produces growth and self-realization. In that case, for the duration of the time in which it is producing, it is Islamic. And the time when it is become counterproductive, it's non-Islamic. In the same way, any other theology or appreciation of the same truth in a different light is as Islamic as what we call Islamic. So Judaism is Islamic if it's producing. Christianity is Islamic. Islam is Islamic. Shiaism is Islamic. Sunnism is Islamic. All of these are Islamic. This will be the noble notion with which Sahib al-Zaman appears on the face of this earth as he establishes that noble human community, and we will conclude on this on Friday. So all these relative understandings of the same truth are all Islamic in the folds of greater Islam. They only become wrong when they become counterproductive. So here, according to this understanding, Islam in itself becomes non-Islamic if it is non-productive. Now, if we have individuality as the absolute norm, and in this individuality there is nothing but self-liberation and growth, and that yields relativity, then we look at other facets. When we talk about pluralism, in the Muslim mind, the word pluralism is connotated by negative concepts. Muslims get afraid of pluralism and plurality, as if he feels that this is an alien imposition upon the mind of the pure Muslim that will drive him away from Islam. On the contrary, it's the absolute hallmark of existence. Pluralism and plurality. Because some has been interpreted pluralism as meaning switching one religion to another religion. Forget that. Look at plurality in the existentialist scope. Within existence, we have nothing but variety and multiplicity. And this variety and multiplicity is complementing each other. And it is giving a greater self-realization to the whole as the whole. And that is the best way to understand plurality and pluralism. That we can have coexistence of variety and relativity, and they lead to a greater glory of the whole. Now, before we go into that, let us explain. We explained yesterday that we have wilayatul faqih system living hand in hand with another Islamic form of governance, which is shura, living hand in hand with international democracy, living hand in hand with monarchy. We are seeing that these different regions of the earth, being influenced by their geography, by their cultures, by their demography, by their economics, they are all evolving at a different rate. They are all after the same existentialist property, which is what? Self-realization and production. Growth, liberation, and self-realization. But all of them stand at different levels. And all of them are accurate so long as it is producing. What is plurality? The coexistence of the whole in a harmonious fashion, that the whole world is evolving gently and beautifully and interacting properly. So we have a variety of the sense of how we govern a government. And therefore here, it would be highly unfair of the West to try and impose democracy upon regions that have their own relativity, that have their own rate of evolution. It would be highly unfair for the West to go and impose its form of democracy upon those people. Just as it's highly undesirable for Iran to suggest that the model of Wilayat al-Faqih should be replicated everywhere in the world. Everyone has a different rate of growth. Everything is relative. Just as it is unfair and unnatural to impose communism on the parts of the earth that are not of that set mindset and of that aptitude. And it might be totally wrong in those regions, but it might be right in the region in which it is applied. So pluralism here means the natural coexistence of all this variety together and interacting properly. Now, if you take this notion, you might end up with a problem. You'll say, well, there is no then standards. We're saying, no, there are standards as well. Because the salient property is growth, self-realization. But we are taking into account the natural relativity that is there as well, and appreciating it and coexisting with it. But you will say, in order for coexistence, there have to be international standards. This is the point that Islam has not omitted at all. It has taken care of this point in a very delicate manner and a very beautiful manner. You see, today we have this particular debate in Islam, that should there be individual cultures or should there be binding universal cultures? The answer is not either or, the answer is coexistence of both together. As human beings, we have identity which are individual, and we have identities which are communal. And identities come upon at greater levels until there is a binding human identity that binds us all together at that human level. And Islam has catered for it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, for the sake of relativity whether in time or in space, that we have not sent any prophet to any race save by their tongue and by their language. Because the prophets will speak to them in their language, in the way that they understand. This is talking about relativity. Now again, look at that verse of the Quran. It does not befit the mu'mineen that they should all flee together. Then why do there not go forth some people from every group, learn from the Prophet, and then go back and warn their people? Why did the Quran say this? From every group some people. Because from every group their people understand the mindset, the mentality, the ways of that group better than anybody else. So the same truth is being received by the Prophet, but when it's going back to those groups, it's acquiring a different color, a different formulation. It's the same truth, but it is acquiring a very different translation in their own languages. So this is plurality that you're finding through relativity, yet there is unity of the truth. What Islam teaches us is something so in sync with the human condition and in existence. How? You know, when we go to Hajj, this is what I noticed this year round. You go to Hajj, you get a big bearded Ayatollah, you get a big bearded Sufi, and you get a big bearded Wahhabi, standing shoulder to shoulder. You can't distinguish one from the other. Yes? All our biases on the basis of appearances are thrown out of the window. You can't distinguish a rich man from a poor man. We can't distinguish a color from another color in terms of the status around the Kaaba. The Kaaba has no fixed direction. It's circular motion around the Kaaba. There is no stagnation. There is no arrest to that unstoppable motion. What does this show to us? It's a beautiful, symbolic gesture that Allah is imposing upon our minds. That you can be individual, there can be relativity, But there is a point within humanity where it directs itself to growth and God. There it all unites under one identity. You have variety of identities dissolved in one identity. When they are at that platform, they are all one. As soon as they leave the Kaaba, they all become individuals again. There's a simultaneous dual identity. There is relativity, individuality, and there is uniformity and universality intertwined together. This is what we understand by plurality. That there are binding, human, common understanding that are befitting human race at the level of humanity. Fair play, justice, liberation, evolution, growth, it may be formulated in different ways in its own parochial surrounding, but nonetheless it's a salient property of humanity, and at one place it binds us all together. So what is the way in which we understand this as Mahdiism? You see, there should not be conflicts. Variety should not be a means of conflict. Variety should be embraced willfully, because that is the absolute norm. Our minds, due to the way in which they have been programmed, think of singularity. We can't allow for variety, and we can't allow for other expressions of the same truth. So we say, if we are on the truth, everything else is false. But the Quran says, the human nature says, existence says, you are on the truth and the other is on the truth in their own context. So it's not a question of true and false, it's a question of truth and truth and truth and truth and truth, all in their own relativistic context. But where is the false then? As we pointed out, when something does not work, when something is not following the path of self-realization, then that becomes the false. If we had that understanding, I mean, the Quran has a very straight understanding of truth and false, godliness and ungodliness. That's the only thing Quran has. It doesn't distinguish between the faiths. According to the Quranic language, there is godliness which is true and there is ungodliness which is false. That's the only distinction the Quran makes. Otherwise, everything in between Quran honors as the truth in its relativistic sense. And at the same time, Quran calls for that overarching human tradition and culture. Call onto the people of the book, let us come together in the worship of Allah, and some of us will not take others as arbab, lords. So the Quran calls for unity at that greater level with humanity. So here what we understand is that relativity is the absolute truth, not the way we are thinking. Mahdi's government of tomorrow will be a pluralistic government, because it's a pluralistic world. By pluralism, what we mean is a happy, harmonious coexistence of variety. But it doesn't stop there. It goes beyond. His government, and if we could understand this properly, then we can actually enact it now and bring about a beautiful world and create that true state of Mahdiism. In his world, which would be our world today, plurality through relativity and individuality should complement each other, adding to a greater truth, not be a means of tearing the human community apart. Least of all, for us to make judgments that I am true, that is false, and only this system will work. You see, so far the Muslim mind says that anything that comes from the West is something that is wrong and false, even without examining it. And anything that comes in the name of Islam is true. Little do they know that whatever is coming in the name of Islam is not Islam. These are the thoughts of people who call themselves Muslims when they apply their brains to the Islamic text, and when they do so, it is very relative to their own upbringing, to their own culture, to their own social and political circumstances. It is nothing to do with Islam as Islam. It is just carrying the label of Islam because it's a Muslim applying his mind to Islamic texts. What he doesn't understand is that his thoughts and evaluation and appreciation of Islamic text is contingent to his own social, political, cultural conditioning. And the same is true across the board within humanity. There is no difference. So this thought that the Muslim has, that Islam is the only righteous religion, if you analyze it, you will find there is no Islam. Islam is still in the process of being discovered. Islam has that beauty. If Islam was discovered right now, the human surge forward, the evolutionary surge forward would cease to exist. The very fact that the Quran is ambiguous and we can't point at any of its meaning shows that Quran is there to promote intellectual growth. Can you imagine if the Quran was simple? It would have been devastated 1400 years ago. It would not have sustained human curiosity till today. If Quran was a simple book and not filled with ambiguity, as Tabatabai says, Tabatabai states, may Allah bless his soul, what a phenomenal thinker. He says ambiguity of the Quran is intertwined within the fabric of the Quran. You can't read it. And now upon analysis we find that there is no word in the Quran, no simple structure, but it is highly ambiguous. We find meaning in there momentarily. But by tomorrow that meaning will change. As we change, the meaning of the Quran will change altogether. Why is it so ambiguous? In order to sustain this growth of humanity and to satisfy human curiosity. The same book that is studied by a child within the primary years of education cannot be studied at the level of graduation. But the Quran is studied from the outset of Islam till today, and it still intrigues us as much. Same is the case with Islam. Islam is not there as a full discovered thing. It is, we are in the process of discovering it. And this formalistic Islam that me and you have is a mere interpretation of Islam, just as Judaism is an interpretation of Islam and Christianity is an interpretation of Islam. If you look at the Quran, and I talked about this at length in last year's lectures, the Quran talks about one religion. It talks about one deen. Look at the thoughts of our scholars on there, the Mufassirin. And when it uses the word Islam, it seldom uses it in the meaning of the formalistic faith. I've only found 2 verses in which the word Islam has been used as Islam, the formal interpretation. And in both of these verses, Allah is talking about it in a very negative sense. When the Arab came and said, Amanna, Allah says, you have not brought faith. Qulu aslamna. Say we have become Muslims. There Islam is used in a formalistic sense. That we have become Muslims for whatever it means. But otherwise the word Islam in the Quran has been used as a means of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the best possible way. Nuh uses it, Ibrahim uses it, Isa uses it, Musa uses it, Yaqub uses it. They all use the word Muslim, Islam, Aslamtu, so on and so forth. And never has it meant the formalistic understanding. So Islam in itself is in the process of being discovered. And its discovery in the rightest sense is in the human context. Just as we discover the truth, we are discovering the truth equally. So, look at this verse of the Quran. Alam yara alladhina kafaru anna as-samawati wal ard kana ratkan fa fataqna. Do not the people who disbelieve see that the heavens and the earth were stuck together and we separated them? Tell me, how would the people who did not believe in Allah 1400 years ago understand the content of this verse? It's a highly sophisticated verse talking about cosmology as we are discovering it today in the 21st century. It's highly ambiguous. It is being discovered through and through. Now 2 people will read the same Quran. They will understand 2 different things. But provided the element of self-realization in the broadest sense, self-realization in the sense of the intellectual, spiritual, moral, physical, social is there, that interpretation is right in its own relativistic, individualistic manner. The collective truth, where the whole of humanity appreciates each other and is able to live with each other and understands the ethos of Islam, the ethos which is a universal human ethos, where differences are supposed to complement each other for the arrival at the greater truth. So long as that is upheld, then that is the rightest form of pluralism, and that is the rightest state of Islam that we are talking about. Now Maulana Rumi talks about this. He says there was an animal brought from India. Now to talk about it at several levels. One, our attitude, and other is how our attitude ought to be. And then develop on Rumi's example. He says an animal was brought, an object was brought from India, he said, confined in a dark room, and people went in to examine. He states they all had a candle. I'm going to depart from Rumi's example at this point and phrase it in my own way from now, yes, henceforth. Now I say, several people went inside that room, and they examined what was in the room. They came out. One said it was a pillar. The other one said it was a hand fan. The third one said it's a broom. The fourth one said it's a nozzle. They were all right. They are all right. None of them are wrong. Where does the wrong bit come? Where does the wrong bit come? When the one who says it's a hand fan is convinced of his truth and unready to accept the truth of the one who says it's a pillar. And as a result, they want to impose upon each other's truth, and fight and kill each other, and become exclusivist in their claims of truth. Now we go back to Rumi. Rumi says they all had a candle in their hand, and they all looked at a portion of that thing. Had they all come together and put their lights together, they would have seen the object for what it was worth. How wonderful is the example he's giving, but I want to go a bit beyond it. So what he is saying is that if all the candles were brought together, they would have seen it's not a pillar, it's not a hand fan, it's not a broom, it's not a nozzle, it's an elephant. I mean, you were laughing at somewhat. It's a moment of euphoria, epiphany, it's an elephant. Anyway, the Arabs didn't know what an elephant was, they were going to run away, yes? So if they all brought their lights together, now this is the charm. This is the charm. When relativity and relative cultures complement each other to arrive at a greater human truth. My own formulation of this is very different. I talk about the principle of no finality, and I'm sure you don't want to hear that right now. It's a very long-winded principle. This is the charm of plurality, appreciation of the other, as opposed to saying it is a pillar, it is a hand fan, it is a broom, and imposing it upon the other and killing each other. People say, okay, how does a pillar and a hand fan and a broom and this thing that I felt come together? Then they would be in a better place to piece it all together. And that is how pluralism works. When relativity comes together, individuality comes together and feeds in, complements each other to a greater truth. Now if you want to see this in action, we can see it in action everywhere. Look at me and you. When we go back home, in our domestic capacity, we are very different in the way we eat, drink, the foods we eat, the clothes we wear, our sleeping habits, our talking habits. Yes? But when we are here in this hall, you will see a group of people from subcontinent interacting in a particular way. A group of Iranians interacting in a different way. A group of Arabs or Iraqis interacting in a different way. And then, when they are mixed together in the one hall in which they find themselves, they acquire a very different culture. There has been no problem. Individually they are separate. Domestically they are separate. In terms of their tribes and clans they are separate. But in terms of one body of lovers of Hussein ibn Ali, they are all the same. And here we see individuality, relativity, feeding into a greater truth and a greater beauty, where somebody will use their traditional gestures and enrich the other person who has their own traditional gesture, and they will exchange it with each other. That is how it's supposed to work, and that is something like what the world of Al-Mahdi will look, because Mahdi's world has to be in sync with the truth, in sync with the way human condition is, in sync with the way existence is. It cannot be otherwise. The problem comes in when human being becomes blinkered, when we don't understand the human condition as a human condition. Now, whilst we're on this point, we can maybe address another point and sort it out as we go along. The issue of symbolism as opposed to abstractness. Yes? You find in regions you have a lot of symbolism. And in regions, I'm going to actually touch on two issues. And in other parts you have zero symbolism. So, in Wahhabi brand of Islam, everything is shirk. Yes? In Sufi brand of Islam, everything is divine. Now when we look at these two, and they are at loggerheads with each other, there is no need to be. In a pluralistic understanding of relativity coming together, complementing each other, we will find it actually enriches the human experience. Think about it like this. A child, you are not, and in fact, I think our imams have told us, don't talk to children about God. They can't handle it. They don't have the aptitude. They're animals in the cradle of animality. They will see their parents as their gods. That's what Imam Sadiq says, that when you promise anything to your child, deliver it because your child thinks of you as their God, because of their tender sort of state of existence. Now children need to play with plasticine. They need pictures, they need models. There is nothing wrong with symbolism. Symbolism is good, it's a charm of life. But there has to come a stage in life where we are able to relate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without any symbols. That state of abstractness of mind and spirit. You know, the Brahmins, some of them, none of them are idol worshippers at that level, because they say they've served their purpose of trying to lead us to God, and now that we've found God, we no longer need to resort to idols as symbolisms of God. Human community needs to acquire this sort of a attitude where differences complement each other, and we arrive at a beautiful state of existence where symbolism has its place, abstractness has its own place, and we give rights wherever it's due, and think about a beautifully balanced community. To say this, that everything is shirk, is wrong. It's nonsensical. How can anything be shirk? And to say, and to go to this level where symbols prevail, and there is no notion of direct connection with Allah, is equally wrong. Now on that point, the dua tawassul and things that we have, now listen to this very carefully, because this is a very important theological, spiritual point. You see, at the outset of our journey towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need these figures to introduce Allah to us, because we can't understand any better. These are godly figures that introduce Allah to us. But at an advanced level of the spirit and the mind, Allah has to be approached directly without any intermediary. It has to be the case. It's a direct connection of me and my God. And at that point, all these prophets and imams acquire meaning through Allah as opposed to Allah acquiring meaning through them. It's a natural process. This is what we mean by relativity coming together beautifully and complementing each other. In the state of Islam, to be honest with you, the very fact that we have these abstract tendencies of the Wahhabis, we have the Sufi tendencies of symbolism, we have the middle roaders, this color, this variety, these different shades have to exist of necessity. The only thing that is wrong is the exclusivists' claims that they have, that I am the only right one. This is where our failure is. to say that Mahdi's world is a world without variety is wholly unreal and unrealistic. It doesn't make sense. Such a world will never exist. But that is shaping our world today. And that is what is leading to all this animosity that we are having. But if we were to sharpen our minds, actually as it's supposed to be, you can see that these differences are actually a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this is the only way for us to exist. Differences have to be. It's unavoidable. In fact, it's a charm of existence. But how to reconcile these differences in that beautiful, holistic sense, in that universal human culture as the Kaaba is supplying to us. Look at the Kaaba. What a powerful symbol to awaken the minds of the Muslim. There is no black, there is no white. There is no male, there is no female. There is no rich, there is no poor. There is no learned, there is no ignorance. There is no adult, there is no child. Everything is bound together at that one level of culture by those universal principles and beautiful values. Yet, within it, there is nothing but relativity and individuality. If we were to allow for this and understand this, imagine how beautiful life would become today. The very fact that we feel challenged, think about this, the very fact that we feel challenged when somebody brings in a different version of what we have understood shows that we have not fallen in line with the principles of existence. But if a person has fallen in line with the principles of existence and understood relativity and plurality, they would welcome a difference of opinion because it is seen as something that will complement what they have already and enrich their experience of the same truth from a different perspective as well. When the Prophet of Islam came to Medina, his attitude was very different to the one that the Muslims have today. I will say this, and I said this in Jummah khutbah in Birmingham, that the Pope in the Crusades said to the Christians, go and regain the Holy Land. And the people, Christians, marched to Jerusalem to claim it. Now, when the Holy Land was claimed, when it was taken back, the Pope felt such a tragic sense of loss that he had a heart attack and he died. I will say to the Pope, it doesn't belong to you, it belongs to God. It's nothing to do with you. Why should you die of a heart attack? Did you really worship God? Now, then Salahuddin came, yes? Salahuddin was in the Holy Land when new crusades came. When you study this, BBC had a program about this. The king from the UK who came to take the Holy Land again, he was outside the walls of Jerusalem. Salahuddin was within the walls of Jerusalem. Think about this carefully now. One or two things I'm going to tell you and see what is happening. The king, because there were pressing issues back in the UK, decided not to attack. Meanwhile, Salahuddin, within the walls of Jerusalem, did not want to risk his life, so he decided to leave. Who is doing what for the sake of Allah here? It's just sheer nonsense in the name of religion. That king had his priorities wrong. Salahuddin was a very ambitious general. Today, then what happened was there was a third King Louis of France who was sanctified, who was a saint now. In fact, if you read historian, I hope, please forgive me for my comments here. I don't respect any saint, any pope, any mujtahid, nobody, if they don't follow the path of the truth that we've understood. It doesn't make any difference to me whether it's a pope or otherwise, or a saint. This Saint Louis, or whatever he was, in fact, he was a psychologically demented person when you look at his history. And the Christians have made him into a saint. He drove the Christians to their deaths in the name of regaining the Holy Land. When you study his history, you think he was psychologically demented. Why did he cause the deaths of so many people? And on the other hand, Salahuddin was a coward. But the Christians uphold him as a saint, and the Muslims uphold Salahuddin as the great savior and saint. Salahuddin was a coward. He was ready to run away from Jerusalem. This is the problem. This is actually the problem. This very exclusivist claims that we have, that I am right, he is wrong, and it brings in such bias in our minds that the most nonsensical people are hailed in Islam as saints and in Christianity as saints. They have nothing to do with sainthood. These people were frail, weak human beings. They weren't in line with existence. How can you compare a prophetic person, an imam, with anything other than them? The people who are true champions and the precursors of the human spirit. This is what distinguishes these imams. They were pluralistic. When the Prophet went to Medina, what did he say to the Christians and the Jews? He said, we believe in everything revealed upon us and everything revealed upon you. There was no exclusivism in the mind of the Prophet, was there? There was no inclusivism either in the way that we understand. Look at how arrogant we become in the modern world. You see, first we were exclusivists. The Christians were exclusivists, the Jews were exclusivists, the Muslims were exclusivists. Only we are on the path of salvation. Then, of course, the modern world shows its wonder that humanity can bridge the gaps. So they became inclusivists, and that's a very arrogant statement for a Muslim to say, my religion is so broad that it includes your religion as well at a lesser level. But the verse of the Quran says, the people who believe, the Jews, the Christians, the Sabians, amongst them, whoever believes in Allah and in the last day and does righteous deeds, will have their reward. He's not talking about greater and lesser truth. He's putting them all on the same pedestal. The Prophet did not say, I believe in everything that is revealed unto me, and that includes everything that's revealed unto you. He didn't say that. He said, I believe in everything revealed unto me, and everything revealed unto you. Did he not say that? What a beautiful soul, what a beautiful mind. Look at the way he was. I'm talking about inclusivism, but not in the narrow, arrogant way that Muslims and Christians talk about it, but inclusivism in what sense? In Mahdi's sense. That the real Islam is yet being discovered. And in the process of its discovery, this Islam, this Christianity, this Judaism, these other isms are all equally included, provided they are serving those fundamental properties of liberation, growth, and self-realization. If we can get that right, then we can use plurality, relativity, individuality to come upon a beautiful state of human existence, in which the only wrong is that which does not serve the human community in the positive way of self-realization. We come to the shahada of a person who was the shining, radiant moon of the Hashimis. Ali Akbar, we only know of him from the narrations of Karbala. But when we read about him, he was a gentle, godly soul. It is said about him that in Medina, he would light up a fire at the outskirts of Medina. And when strangers would pass by, he would say to them, do you need to be hosted on this night? This is the godly soul of Hazrat Ali Akbar. We hear that after the death of Rasulullah, Al-Hussein prayed to Allah and he said, give me one who is a copy of your messenger. And Allah gave him Ali Akbar. And a testimonial to this is Hamid ibn Muslim. He says, when they saw him from afar, they said, Allahu Akbar. When he came near, they said, La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah. At once they were reminded of Muhammad Rasulullah. This was Akbar, the radiant son of the Hashimis. But I'll tell you something else about Akbar. And beyond Akbar, his mother. When Hajara found out that Ismail may have slit the neck of her son, she came running to Mina. And she said, Ismail, where is he? Ibrahim said, there he is. Let me look at him. Ibrahim said, oh Hajra, your child is here. She said, let me look at his neck. She looked at his neck and there was a faint line of the knife. She looked at it and she collapsed and fainted. From the thought, what if God had not intervened? And what if this neck was cut? She stayed in that state for 7 days and then she died. I will say, Hajra, come to Sham with me. There is a point where the women are gathered and they are given liberty to cry over their dead. And we read this in descriptions that the head of Hussein was brought and Zainab took it into her lap. The head of Abbas was brought. Kulthum took it. Other heads were brought. And then a head appeared. And the women of Sham cried out, oh Allah, let not his mother be alive to witness this. Such was the form of Akbar. When they were advancing towards Karbala, Hussein momentarily fell asleep. As he slept, he abruptly awoke. And he said, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Akbar said, oh father, indeed, we shall return to Allah. But what causes you to state this at this point? He said, oh child, I saw in my dream that there was a call from heavens. O caravan of Hussein, advance towards your death. And I abruptly awoke. He said, oh father, are we not on the truth? Hussein said, oh child, who else can be on the truth but us? Akbar said, oh father, in that case, what difference does it make? Whether death advances to us or we run and embrace death ourselves. It is the day of Ashura. Hussein's army has fallen. Abbas remains. Qasim remains. Imam Hussein comes to Akbar and he says, oh child, I would like you to go on behalf of your father in single combat with these enemies of God. He said, oh father, I shall go with will. He said, oh child, before you go to your mother, go to your aunt, go to your sisters, bid them farewell, as one who will never return bids farewell to his mother and sisters. The Rawi says, as Akbar entered within the tent, I heard cries of women fill the air of Karbala. The women were falling at the feet of Akbar, not letting him go, knowing now that he will go and never return. The Rawi says, I saw that cloth of the tent lift and fall 10 times. Every time Akbar would decide to come out, somebody would come around Akbar and prevent him. Finally, Akbar emerges out of the tent. When he ascends his steed, Hamid ibn Muslim says, Hussein looked at Akbar from head to toe. And he said, Allahumma ashhad ala haulai al-qawm. O Allah, bear witness upon these people. For now I send to them one who resembles your messenger in form, in speech, and in mannerism and etiquette. And then Hamid ibn Muslim states, I heard Hussein cry out aloud. And these were the first cries of Hussein to be heard on the plains of Karbala on the days of Ashura. It was as if a mother was crying upon the body of her child. O Akbar, go in the way of Allah. Akbar advances. As he advances, he hears something behind him. He stops and turns and looks. Hussein is walking behind him, falling, with his hand upon his chest. O father, did you not bid me farewell? O child, go in the way of Allah. O father, what is this that I see from you? He said, O Akbar, had you an Akbar, you would not ask me this question. Akbar goes and fights. He kills many of the enemies of Hussein. Layla comes out of the tent. She says, "Oh Hussein, I wish to see my child once more." He said, "Layla, lift your hands towards the sky and plead with Allah, O Lord of Yaqub, who returned his Yusuf to him, bring back my Akbar to his Hussein." No sooner had she made this dua that Akbar came back. He said, "Oh Father, thirst kills me. If only I had a sip of water, I would engage once more with your enemies. The coat of mail burdens me, O Father. The shield I can no longer bear." Hussein looks at him, "O child, cast aside your coat of mail. Cast aside your shield. O child, draw near to me. Take my tongue inside your mouth. You may find some cool from it." Akbar takes Hussein's tongue inside his mouth and says, "Oh Father, you are thirstier than I. O child, go. Your grandfather will quench your thirst." Akbar goes into the enemies, recites war poetry, engages them and fights them, when an enemy from the back strikes the head of Akbar with his sword. When Akbar's head is struck with his sword, Akbar can no longer contain himself on the saddle. So what he does is, he lowers his head upon the mane of the horse and grabs the neck of the horse. Hamid ibn Muslim narrates that either Khawli or one another said, "By Allah, I shall strike such a wound upon this youth that his father will die with that wound. I said to him, let them be. They are tearing him into pieces. They will kill him." He advanced towards Akbar, struck at Akbar's arms. As Akbar loosened his grip, he struck into the chest of Akbar and tried to lift Akbar with his spear. Akbar fell to the ground and spear broke. And Akbar cried out, "Ya Abata, alayka minni salam. O Father, peace be with you." Hussein said, "Wa Aliya, O Ali, call on to me. Where are you?" Hussein makes way towards the Maqtal. He falls and stands, and he cries out, "O Ali, call on to me that I may come to you." Abbas Kummi narrates, before Hussein reaches Akbar, he finds Akbar in the embrace of a woman lamenting upon Akbar. He said, "O maid of God," he was distracted, "who are you to cry upon my youth in this wilderness where I have no friends?" She looks at Hussein, "O Hussein, is he not my child?" Hussein takes her, "O Zainab, return to the tents." Abbas Kummi says Zainab did this deliberately. She knew had Hussein observed the dagger, Hussein would have died with it. Hussein comes to the body of Akbar. He sits, he says, "O child, this world has become a darkened place after you." He takes off his helmet and places dust upon his head and says, "O child, your old father is left without you." Akbar holds his chest. Hussein says, "O child, why do you have your hands upon your chest?" He says, "Father, I beseech you for the sake of Allah, do not ask me to remove my hands." But O Akbar, remove your hands. As Akbar removes his hands, Hussein sees a dagger implanted, or the end of a spear implanted deep into Akbar's chest. He looks towards the sky and says, "O Ibrahim, come and witness how I give my Akbar in the way of Allah. Neither are my eyes blindfolded, neither are his hands and feet tied." Akbar rubs his heel upon the ground. Hussein says, "O child, is there anything I can do for you?" Akbar breaks into a smile. Hussein says, "O child, why do you smile?" He says, "My grandfather comes to me. He is quenching my thirst with Kauthar and says to you, 'O Hussein, come to me, I await you eagerly.'" Akbar breathes his last. Hamid ibn Muslim describes Hussein together with the Hashimis are taking back the body of Akbar to the tent. As they take back the body of Akbar to the tent, a woman appears outside the tent. And she says, Wa Akbar, and falls upon his body. Humayd ibn Muslim said, is this his mother? I was told, no, this is his aunt Zainab. Hussein separates her, consoles her and takes her back. As he takes him forward, a bewildered woman comes out, who has, as if it appears, she has lost her world. She says, oh Hussein, my child, my child. In a bewildered state, this woman comes baffled. Hussein runs to her, leaves the body of Akbar, embraces her, and does not let her come near the body of Akbar. I ask, who was this? I was told this was the mother of Akbar. Martyr Hussein.